Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of All Things Awesome. I'm Sherrie Dunlevy, your Inspirationista, and I am so excited to welcome today's guest. This is a woman that I met through Facebook without even knowing that I was meeting her when I joined a Facebook group called Grief Anonymous, and it was for loss of a child. And when I got on LinkedIn, we got connected. And then next thing I know is that I'm talking to the founder of Grief Anonymous. And Holly Barker has been so wonderful in agreeing to talk with me and talk with all of you about her journey and about what she is doing. So Holly, first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to spend time with us today on All Things Awesome.
Hey, and thank you so much for reaching out to me. I'm very privileged and honored to be sitting here chatting with you today.
Well, we have kind of forged a fast friendship, and I think like we're kindred souls that have finally discovered one another. And
Right.
It's so funny because both of our lives have changed immensely because of great pain in our lives. But it has, I think, it catapulted us both into our purpose and our passion now of trying to make the world a better place by helping us help one another. I have done that through my book, How Can I Help? And through my Facebook group, All Things Awesome. You have done it through Grief Anonymous. But before we talk about Grief Anonymous, we have to talk a little bit about you and your
Okay,
story and how this all came to be.
sure thing. So I married. I'm from North Carolina, and back when I was 28 years old, I met the most dashing, awesome, handsome Canadian guy named Jordan Barker. And we were living in North Carolina at the time, and we had a wonderful relationship. 2 years into our marriage, we had my son Jackson, and about 5 years into our marriage, I was in downtown Chicago. I was working as a pharmaceutical sales rep in a hospital with Abbott Laboratories, and I got a phone call. And my husband told me, "I need you to sit down because I have some news for you. I have cancer." And I remember that very pivotal moment, and I'll never forget it. And I flew home, and we started going through all the tests and scans, and it turned out that he had malignant melanoma. So he went through about a year and a half of treatment. We stayed in North Carolina for another 3 years. And then he had the opportunity to go up to Canada, where he was from, and run the Canadian operations for his company. And I was all for it. It was 2008, and I was ready for a change. We needed a new environment and a fresh start to put everything that all the trauma that we had gone through behind us. So we moved up there, and it was glorious. We had 5 amazing years up there, and it was just an amazing experience. But again, I was at work. I was in the Niagara Health region, and I got a phone call, and he said, "I need you to pull over." And I did, and he told me he had metastatic melanoma, and he lived for 6 more weeks.
Mm.
And during that time, I had the opportunity to write and to connect with a lot of different people through a website called caringbridge.org. And what that does is it helps people who are terminally ill with caregivers being able to like say the story one time, write it out, post pictures, and then get responses from it. And it's an amazing healing, comforting way of doing things because it doesn't overtax the caregiver, and then also everybody gets to know what's going on who cares and wants to be a part. So anyways, he passed away, and it was a surreal experience, me being in the pharmaceutical industry and being in the medical community for 16 years and going through everything that I did as a caregiver for 8 years, is that I started looking for support for grief, and I found very little of what I was looking for. And I'm not saying that there's not grief support out there, because, for example, hospice is an amazing organization. It does tremendous good, but that's where he passed away. So it was more of a trigger for me to go there. So it's not all one organization is good for all people, and that doesn't matter what industry or organizations you have out there. So anyways, the point was is I couldn't find what I needed. And I had a very dear friend that I know God put into my life. His name is David, and he was a recovering alcoholic. And he had this massive, wonderful spiritual transformation from being someone that was almost dead from their alcoholism and committing so many, problems within his family and in his community, and all of a sudden being transformed into this individual that was living, breathing, and conscious and giving back and being a good father and a good citizen. And I'm like, well, he said, why don't you come to one of my open meetings and see how we do this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm up for it. So we went on a trip out to Telluride, Colorado, very spiritual journey for me for healing. And we went to a little stone church in Telluride. And I went to my first, and actually it's the only Alcoholics Anonymous meeting I went to, but it was the most amazing experience I ever had. I just was looking around at all these people who felt broken and who were struggling and doing their best, and they were following a program to get better. And alcoholism is for life. And I knew then that there's no way that this grief is ever going to leave my heart. It'll change, and I want it to change, but it's always going to be there. So I felt the connection on that level too. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is what we need. And then I started, I flew home. I went through some transitions. I moved back to the United States in North Carolina, and I started looking everything up, and it turned out that there was no Grief Anonymous. Nobody had ever thought about doing it, and I was actually kind of shocked. And so I applied for the trademark. I established the business, and I started doing talks. And there was a woman in the audience named Rita Calberry stepped forward, and she goes, I want to help you. I just lost my brother in a ambulance accident. And so she said, I'll help you look for a place around Charlotte. And why don't we go ahead and start an online group just to get some ideas and start helping people on Facebook. I said, all right, let's give it a whirl. So we just did that. And it was in July of 2016. And by December of that year, we had 4 million people on the page. We had expanded to about 16 different groups. And I had a group of about 10 executive administrators most of them are still with me today. Mm-hmm. And all of it is built upon the same premise that, you have to experience grief to be able to, lead a Grief Anonymous group. So all of my executive administrators are people specifically who have lost that person, and they lead that group. And we're at about 45,000 members, and we have about 60,000 followers on the main page. And I started the first local chapter here in Wilmington, Illinois, at the little iconic diner called the Launching Pad that I bought for this very reason.
Wow. So that's been quite a journey.
That's the story.
So how are there any other chapters now throughout the United States or the world?
What is important to me through this whole process is patience.
Mm-hmm.
And
I know.
And the thing is that my life has been an absolute, it's like paralleled lives. You kind of, you stay in that zone where you're still working on your grief and your loss and the pain and everything that's happened around it. And then if you really put your focus and attention on the things that you want to do because you want to live, that's the lane that this is in. And so I'm living in this lane with my new restaurant with my partner, who also lost his wife to cancer, and we have 3 boys. So we have a lot going on in our lives. We have a massive organization that's growing every day online, and we're working on the local meeting. And my point to that is I'm ready for it to start developing and moving into different locations. I've learned a tremendous amount of what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And I think I needed this time to really be able to kind of keep it very simplistic and realistic. And I have kind of a prototype that I'm working on that I'm ready to start talking to people about. And I'm actually now got the restaurant open and running too. It was a complete disaster. It looked like a Jurassic Park scene where everybody dropped what they were doing and ran out the door. No joke. There was still grease in the fryers in this place after 5 years. And we had to totally gut the restaurant and everything. And I established the back room as the GA room. And
Okay.
now we have it fully functioning. It's thriving. It's doing great. We have hundreds of people coming through a day from foreign countries doing the Route 66 tour. And we have the Gemini Giant in our parking lot. And so that's the great exposure that Grief Anonymous and the Grief Resource Network is going to be getting, is it's all right there.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the Grief Resource Network and Grief Anonymous. Um, what all that entails. And I've been on there, and sometimes it's so heartbreaking because people are so broken by this.
Yep,
Um,
they
I
sure
think
are.
I think that, and I don't know. I mean, I've been through it with the loss of a son. You've been through it with the loss of a husband, and I think that both of us have. I look at it as after I lost my son's journey was 29 days on this earth. Mine still continues. His journey was completed for what it was supposed to be. His life was what it was supposed to be. My life, because I'm still here, means that I must continue on and find my purpose and find why I'm here and learn from that experience. That experience happened in my life. That experience was not my life. It was a chapter in my life. So what can I learn from it so that I can be a light for others? I see so many people, though, that are trapped in
Hmm.
grief, and if they let go of that grief, they feel like they're failing their loved one, or that it proves to the world that they don't love them if you move on. Does that make sense?
Yes, it kind of does. I think what it does is with Grief Anonymous, we allow people to hold on and to transform at the same time. And I think that's really important, that it's just they feel like, if I know what you're saying, if they feel like, if they laugh, if they feel
Right.
like they went to a party and actually had a good time, they feel like, if they, for example, a spouse, if they go on a date to have a cup of coffee with a new person, that they are betraying someone. Absolutely. And so I think that our number one goal in this whole thing with Grief Anonymous is that we help people move forward in their
Mhm.
lives, and we let them. I mean, I've said to my son since the day he could even understand it, carpe diem, and I truly believe in that. And so it is. We get, like between 50 and probably 50 and 100 new people within a couple of weeks within the child loss group. And so what happens is, we've had these people in who have been with Grief Anonymous for a long time. Well, not long, but like a couple years. They start helping those people who are new, who are trapped. We're always going to have trapped people in our organization in the beginning, and that's our goal, is to help them. We give back and we help them to become untrapped.
Right.
And I really, I'm kind of a skeptic on support groups. I never was a big support group fan, to be honest with you, because I never wanted. I felt like a congregation of commiseration is what I would call them. And I thought, if I'm going to create the support group, I'm going to create it in a way that truly helps people heal. And so that is the point of the 10 tenets of Grief Anonymous. It was a collection of my own experience, divine, um, just,
Action.
oh, inspiration, and then being in some of these early groups back in the day when these first formed, and which was in 2014, 2015 is when groups started budding on Facebook. And I learned that the experiences, the things that I needed to get through this, were very synonymous and similar to the people that I was reading in the groups. So it helped me to understand that, yes, this is important, such as, baby steps and leaps of faith. Okay. Finding a creative outlet for your grief, facing your fears, creating or finding a sanctuary for healing. I mean, that is important, and it is a full broad scope. So you could be your church, it could be a park, in a path. It could be what I'm sitting in right now is my sanctuary. I felt the need to create a space in my home that had all my mementos, all the beautiful energy that surrounded all the beautiful things. And that's where I wanted to go to cry, to pray, to meditate, to, just be. and be in my pain. And so that's how this was created. So it's not just about meeting people, but also using the tenets in your daily life to focus on the positive and get stronger and survive and thrive.
And you have to feel, and you have to
I have to feel it.
yeah, you have to. One of the things after I lost my son back in 1999, and because he was so critically ill, my doctor and my mother thought that, this was going to be too much for me to handle, this plus taking care of a baby at home. So, we, I guess, decided that I was going to be on some antidepressants, which I understand their thought process through this. But when my son died, I think it hindered my grieving. And I truly did not grieve for my son until 13 years later, after he died. I knew that it was trapped inside of me too. I could feel it. So I have that experience that I can share with others, is that you've got to feel the feelings if you want to pass through this valley, and come out the other side. It's going to change you. It's going to transform you.
Yes.
It's always going to be with you, but you can get through it. But there's no way over, under, around. It is totally through.
You're totally right. And there are so many people who do get stuck. And when I see what you're saying, I see the vision of people like a flood of people just holding on to branches and going by you. And it's like you're trying to reach in and you're trying to catch people through this. And, I can say this to you about your experience of the numbness. Two things you said, the antidepressants. Well, the truth of the matter is that there is no pill for grief.
Right.
You have to feel it. And if you are not depressed, you're grieving, and you take an antidepressant, it could push you into that flat effect where it takes away your emotions. And the interesting thing too about this whole experience is, I think my past and being in pharmaceutical sales is incredibly important, because when I started in pharma, I was selling Prozac with Eli Lilly back in 1998. And worked with them for 2 years. Then I stayed in the antidepressant market. So I called on psychiatrists, I called on all kinds of healthcare providers, and mental illness, and was top of everything that I talked about. And throughout the span, I did other drugs, and I ended up with selling Abilify in Ontario, which is for schizophrenia and bipolar. So I was well versed into the community, and we never talked about grief the entire time, ever.
Wow.
And so I know, because I was a part of this whole culture, and there's so many good things about it, but there's not enough education for doctors and for people out there about this whole process and how it needs to be incorporated in. And I guess my point is that it takes a community to help us. And I think that's really important. And we need to, I saw this quote and I put it on LinkedIn, and it was like, instead of just constantly pulling people out of the water, let's go to the source of why people are falling in, and I do think that interventions, your attitude, the things that we do, whereas in the past where people would float down the river for 10 years, now we can catch them sooner and help them, because people are understanding grief more, and we're starting to recognize it, and hopefully this whole thing is going in the right direction. I consider myself the Ralph Nader, because if I see something that's truly off course, I'm on it.
That's wonderful. And I love that your tenants are so different, because you know what? I think that there's this 5 stages of grief that drives me insane. I know it drives you insane, right? Because that is just not true. And
none of it's true.
And the thing is I hear so many professionals saying this. Well, the 5 tenets of grief, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so not right.
Well, not only that, but let me tell you something. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who came up with the research and did all of the work for death and dying. Those are death and dying guidelines, and I can truly see how that truly was the case. It's like the same thing that we came up with the tenets. The death and dying in the 5 stages of that is pretty real. And but the point is that there was no paradigm for helping grieving people, and so they just kind of, whoever did it just kind of took that whole concept and said, here, I guess, because it makes no sense, and it's really confusing to people starting in they're like, well, I don't quite understand what stage I'm in. I'm like, because there is not a stage. So we're doing our best to dispel all of that, and I think it's going to happen pretty darn quick, that people are going to, once they see the popular movement that's going on with people like what we're saying and other people out there, they're going to drop it like a hot potato and start paying attention to what's out there.
I hope so. But you know what, Holly, the one thing that scares me is that we are in an instant gratification society. And what people don't realize is that if you're not willing to do the work, you can't get there. You know,
Yep.
we want a pill. We want the right words. We want the right actions, even to get through or to help someone through. And that, you know, there are things that we can do to assist in the process, but it is a process. What you said at the beginning of the interview, it's patience. It's so hard for all of us. It's hard for you. It's hard for me. And when you're grieving, you just don't want to feel like this anymore. You just want to see the sunshine again, you know?
Yep. And that's where, it's the same thing as, and that's why Grief Anonymous is very synonymous with Alcoholics Anonymous, in that it's like you have to get to that point where you haven't gotten off your couch in a week. You haven't taken a shower in a week. You, all this, that, and the other. And these tenants come in and somehow they're like, I got to do something about this. And I think the beauty of the phone and the beauty of the connection that people have had, that looking back, a lot of people don't like social media or think it's kind of fake or phony or it's, whatever. But this is something real that happens in a very beautiful way when it comes to social media and Grief Anonymous and Facebook, is that we can reach that person that's laying on the couch, that can't move, can't think, and is in total physical, mental, spiritual pain. And we can be there, and they can become a community of thousands of people who are feeling the same way, and they can make a post and they can get 50 comments and hearts and likes, and something comes alive in them. And they are able to get off the couch because we say, you know what, get some exercise, move to another room of the house, go to the mailbox, face your fears. There's going to be stuff in that mailbox that you don't want to read and you don't want to see, but just go. And then they just face their fear, they go get it, and they put it somewhere.
Yeah.
If you can't eat, go through the drive-through. If you can't leave your house today, it's okay, but just move your body. Go see your doctor if you can't sleep. So we are reaching people at that level, whereas then that's what the beauty is for this on. And I never knew that. I had no idea that was going to happen. It's a God thing.
Yeah. The thing is I always tell people, you can use your social media powers for good or you can use them for bad, and I choose to use them for good. And the thing is that, one person that you don't know can say something that makes a light bulb click, that can be the difference between deciding you want to live or just preparing to die.
Yes, that is very, very, very true. And I think, and I want to say this too, is when this thing keeps going the way I know it's going to go, and I've been in part of grant making and studies and everything, the grieving community needs a national database, like the Framingham Heart Study was conducted, where you follow people, because the study paradigms that are set up now for disease do not fall in well with grief, because they're time bound, and it's too much. So what you have to do is just follow these people from baseline, look at where they've come from, what their medical history is, their mental history, all that stuff, and then follow it forward. And I think that what we will do is find truly that some big reasons why there's such homelessness is because of grief. They will find that there's a tremendous amount of addiction, alcoholism out there because of grief. I think that, I mean, all of these things is no doubt in my mind that grief is the underlying cause of a lot of the problems from a macro level that's going on. You know, I love statistics. I love census data. I love that kind of solid data that comes back, because that's the kind of stuff that we need from a grieving perspective. And I read a government study that was done on death row inmates. And what they found was that 85% of those death row inmates lost a significant caregiver at a young age. And that broke my heart. And I was like, they had nothing. They had no support. They probably had a parent who was working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. They were angry. They were getting, all this stuff. And I think, my God, we got to start. If there's anything that I want the most to come out of this, is to help children who have lost parents or caregivers to grief, because I'm raising 3 boys, and I know how much attention and time that we put into these kids to try and get them through the loss of their parents. And I cannot imagine out there what other kids are going through that don't have this support. I really don't. And I think they're being misclassified. I have I want to say this one last thing. I have a wonderful woman who leads the child loss group with Grief Anonymous. She is a former prison guard and a nurse for juvenile detention centers. And she said that those detention centers are full of kids that have either been abandoned by a parent or lost a parent to death. And I'm just like, we got to do something about it. So that's my heart.
Better. And it boils down to compassion and love and reaching out. And I was thinking when you were saying that about incarcerated people, just losing someone, loss and grief is not just death. It could be losing your health. It could be losing someone who is incarcerated. It could, losing your livelihood because you're at home caregiving. Losing your spouse, divorce. Grief takes on so many, and we're not dealing with that. No one knows how to deal with that. And you go to your pastor or priest, and a lot of times it's just, a bunch of doctrine, that from that perspective. And when you go to your doctor, it's, the medical cause. People don't realize then that after losing someone, you have some of your most serious medical problems. And it all comes from grief.
Yes.
And bosses, well, there's a policy in the handbook for, their grieving policy. That's a starting point, not an ending point.
It's 3 days.
Yeah.
It is, all it is focused on time off to bury your loved one. That's what it's for. And, there's a lot of companies out there who are very caring of their, I'll tell you what, my husband's company, unbelievable with everything that we went through. My company, the executives of my pharmaceutical company in Canada with Otsuka got on an airplane. I'd worked for the company for 3 months. I had really connected with them too. And I was really having a good run of starting this beautiful job of mine. They got on a plane and they came to my husband's funeral from Montreal. So I know there's a lot of really good things that are going on in corporate America to help. And there's a lot of horrible things. And we do need to start addressing grief in the workplace, no doubt. It has to be addressed, because I know it's probably equal to depression and in terms of affecting employment, output and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm in the process of writing my new book. I need your help, and it's for the professionals. And that's one of the things that someone said is I just, it's just so difficult. People don't understand this. We need that kind of support, and that's what I'm hoping to do. So I'm so glad. I know that we were brought together for a reason.
Amen.
I really do. I know that this is just the beginning, not the end.
Yes.
And I know that we just scratched the surface of what you're doing, but these are only 30-minute podcasts and interviews. So right now, I've got to say, we have to end this here, but it's just a stopping point. We'll pick it up again, I'm sure. Okay.
Anytime you want to talk, I'm more than welcome. I love getting on and talking with you. I think we have so many things we could talk about. So you just let me know, my friend.
I know I need a visit to your diner, and a tour of Route 66. So I know that that's coming soon too. So Holly, thank you for the work you're doing. Please, real quick, tell people how they can find you and find these support groups.
No problem. Okay, so first of all, if you Google online grief support, we are #2 on Google for Grief Anonymous. So you'll find a lot of the information there. You can go to Facebook, your search bar, and type in Grief Anonymous. It takes you to our page. And on our page, there is a group section. And when you tap on the group tab, it'll drop down, and we have over 20 groups. Definitely answer the questions that are asked when you're prompted to go in. They do say closed groups, and that means that what you put in the groups is shared only with group members, even if it shows up in your feed, and then you can join our groups that way. You can also find the Grief Resource Network. It's our up-and-coming grief support and services information hub for our membership. We are building that, so it's going to be ongoing in the next couple of years, and that's griefresourcenetwork.com. And then you can also look me up on hollycbarker.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Holly. I appreciate it. And I love spending time with you with you today. And thank you for all the wonderful work that you do to help heal us.
I look forward to talking with you again. And
okay.
Thank you for all the work you're doing out there.
Oh,
it is incredibly important. Okay.
Thank you. All right.